morning, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about discipleship, but not discipleship of the past, discipleship of today. So I was thinking about, all week long, I've been thinking about discipleship, and it's such a religious term, and I wish it weren't like that. So hopefully that you'll discover from today's message that discipleship is actually a state of consciousness. The more illumined we are, the greater our discipleship. Discipleship to me means a consciousness that is able to serve others. And the more that person serves, the greater their discipleship. So discipleship and consciousness work together. I was thinking of when I was young and attending church that we heard about Christ's disciples. But that was a teaching of 2,000 years ago. So what about today? What about the disciple in today's society, in our modern era? And that's where we want to bring ourselves to think about not what we might have been 2,000 years ago, that we might have been a disciple of Christ, but as consciousness has expanded and grown over 2,000 years ago to today, 2025, surely, even though the word is the same, the expression is different. It has to be different because disciples are leaders, not past leaders, but leaders today, and most especially leaders of the future. It's like the teaching. The teaching is called the ageless wisdom. Ageless, that's the key word, is ageless. So it builds upon itself. It's not static. The teaching comes to us to meet the need of humanity where humanity is, where it has grown to. But then in that process, there are seeds that are being planted for us to nurture, so these seeds will germinate and blossom and take us into a future that is much more beautiful, much more expansive, much more understandable. Life is more understandable than it was, let's say, 2,000 years ago, or even today. So to bring us to this point and that point, we need illumined ones. So disciples are illumined ones. Discipleship is based on our striving, on our self-exertion. This is an interesting statement to think about, is that disciples are self-born. They are self-born. They produce themselves. Now, if you really think about that, take this idea home with you today and ask yourself, am I a disciple? Am I self-born? Have I produced myself? And that means we all have the potential of being an illumined one. We have the potential of being a disciple, one who serves others, one who gives who they are. They give their potential, their self-realization to humanity. And that humanity can start with their family. It should start with their family and then expand from the family out into the community and as far out as their life will allow them to reach. In the past, if we worshiped some master, we became a disciple. But today, we find that disciples are those who are really working on themselves. They really take their life in their hands and chisel it, and with self-striving and exertion, they shape themselves into, we could say, this most beautiful flower that has so many petals. Let's call it a disciple, we could say, is 1,000-petaled illumined being. And these petals, as we are unfolding our potential, as we are striving, as we are working in ourselves, this potential, these 1,000 petals within our beingness, within our consciousness, begins to unfold. And if there's a point we reach where we get so bored with ourselves that we move out into the world and find a position that is there to serve, not themselves, but humanity. Eventually they see within themselves that this must be removed, this part of themselves must be transformed, this part lived in the past, it's not the future, we need to get rid of the past. These things must be changed within ourselves so that we can repair our past and bring forth a mechanism that we were potentially born with that will begin to blossom, and we will no longer be bored with ourselves, but excited about life and humanity and giving ourselves to others. We are going to be disciples because life imposes upon us to improve. Just think about it. All these difficulties, the pain, the suffering, the anguish that comes across the threshold into our lives is put there so that we can improve. So I'm of the belief that let's start working on ourselves, and as we work on ourselves and change the mechanism of the past into the potential, unfolding potential of the future, then we are overcoming karma very rapidly. We're no longer having to learn tests that have been given to us through pain and suffering and so forth. We must improve physically, emotionally, mentally, and especially spiritually. Disciples know that reincarnation is a fact of life. We improve ourselves not only for this life, but future lives, our lives to come. We know that if we work to perfect ourselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, that this labor is recorded in recording devices. Now, let your imagination work here. We have recording devices in our nature that the teaching calls permanent atoms. It's just they're little recording devices, and these recording devices become part of us, and we take them with us from one incarnation to another, to another, to another. So all that we are doing to perfect ourselves, to break off the corners of the past, allow this 1,000-petal lotus to start unfolding. All that we do to bring these petals into blossom go into these permanent atoms, into these recording devices, and we take them with us from one life to another, to another, to another. And this is how geniuses come into existence. It's very interesting. The New Age disciple looks for resources within themselves. They have lots of potentials, and these potentials must be opened and unfolded. It's like you receive Christmas gifts. You receive a lot of Christmas gifts. And what do? You open them up and you look at them. You use some of them. You give some of them away. There are millions of Christmas boxes within us. In other words, within our consciousness. So this is why I think that I understand and I think about my own discipleship in terms of the measurement of my consciousness. The greater, the broader, the more illumined my consciousness is, the greater, the more illumined, the greater servant I can be to my family, to my community, and to the world. So we're going to open our boxes, our Christmas boxes, as a form of discipleship because they represent our inner potential. It's a great visual. I just love this idea of that we have a lot of Christmas boxes, Christmas gifts within ourselves. All we have to do is open them up. Box after box must be opened within ourselves. And who's going to open these boxes? We have to open them ourselves. New Age disciples do not depend on anybody. They work together as a synthesis. This is why the word synthesis is a term that when the cycle of the year 2000 came about and we had the conclave of hierarchy, that meeting, they decided that the keynote for the coming 100 years would be synthesis. See, and now we're in a phase of synthesis called transformation. Synthesis is when we work together as a group, as a body of co-workers, cooperative co-workers. The United Nations was planted as just as that idea for us to symbolize what we are as countries to become. We are as families are to become. It's like, think about blended families. If you've ever been in a blended family, it is so difficult, but it's the modern era. Blended families coming together and not killing one another, but try to take the past, change it through striving, and meld beauty, merge beauty together so that these families now reach out to other families and other families until now we have a culture of community of blended nationalities, blended religions, blended concepts that are so beautiful. There's no sense of separativeness now. It's all unity. Discipleship improves as everything in the world improves. For example, science and education, finance, law, and even discipleship have all improved. We're going to review the difference today between past disciples and the disciples of the future. So let me get started here. I know I won't be able to cover everything, but we'll get enough, get the idea. In the past, discipleship was dedicated to the discipline of physical, emotional, and lower mental bodies. And this is interesting. This is all from the teaching. And the cultivation of memory, or the power of memory. This was how disciples worked on themselves in the past. The discipline of the three bodies and the cultivation of memory and the power of memorizing. We've seen images, I've seen this, it just drives me crazy. Videos of, you call them gurus or cities, where they are sitting in the top of a mountain, let's say the Himalayan mountains, and the storm has just come through and it's freezing cold and there's tons of snow, and here you have this yogi or siddhi, S-I-D-D-I, out there in all these contortions and weirdness, or they're in a cave somewhere starving themselves, because that's the discipline that they're putting. This is the past. Also, people in various religions have labored to memorize page after page of their holy books. I even see people in the co-workers, friends in the esoteric community that reiterate, they've memorized verses from Agni Yoga and they give them back to me and they're so proud of themselves. And I say, okay, thank you very much. Now tell me, what does it mean? See, we can memorize, and that brings a certain amount of knowledge into our consciousness. But what we want is to know what it means. To know what it means we're living what we know. Future disciples are interested in the higher mind and intuition and building the bridge between the lower and the higher. That's future disciples. Future means we have to start it now. The seeds have been planted for us. The great ones, the sages, came to the planet, planted these ideas for our future. Now we're trying to pick up these ideas, bring them into existence, and how this bringing into existence takes place is that 1,000-petal lotus is beginning to, it's just like it's opening up because of the rays of the sun. And the rays of the sun are the rays of hierarchy. And the rays of hierarchy will select certain petals in our 1,000-petal lotus. And now we are moving into a greater illumined state, because we are interested in building our higher mind, our intuition, and the bridge between the lower and the higher mind. We're not rejecting former disciplines and all those things we put ourselves through for many, many incarnations. But the emphasis, the focus now is on increasing the function of our higher mind and connecting our higher mind with the Buddhic plane of consciousness, in other words, aka intuition. So the New Age disciple of the future has a greater task in front of them. We have a greater task in front of us. If we're only occupied with disciplining our physical, emotional, mental bodies, do you know what that makes us? Old age. Doesn't make any difference if you're 20 or 50, you're still an old age disciple. And you're going to see that you cannot meet the requirements of the new visions. Because why? You're so self-centered. You know, you want to be good. You want to be illumined. You want to be perfect. But your perfection is in the past. These are things you brought from the past into this life. And now it's not the discipline of the physical, emotional, mental body. It's building those lower bodies, bridging them with the higher body, with the higher mind. And from the higher mind to the Buddhic level of consciousness, that's where our discipline for today's disciple is found. Intuition, listen to this, intuition is beyond the mind. Intuition is beyond the mind. It is simultaneous, all-inclusive understanding of events, problems, and ideas. That's intuition. Now, the higher mind always creates straight knowledge. Straight knowledge is whatever you need to know, your mind presents. That's straight knowledge. Whatever your mind needs to know, whatever you need to know, the higher mind presents it to you. It is a very advanced mechanism. For example, if you have your higher mind operating, you do not need to sit and think too much or to research too much. Because the mind has all these things. I know this through experience, and you can imagine my delight when I found this definition, reading one of the books, when there's this definition of straight knowledge. Wow! So that's what straight knowledge is. So I don't have to research every book in my library to get an answer. It is given to me because of the mechanism called the higher mind. You push the button and it comes like a computer. Sometimes you've had these experiences where when you were thinking about something and the answer was there, right? You've had these experiences. That's not intuition, it's straight knowledge. That's coming from the higher mind, your higher mind. Now we have another term called the antikarana. The antikarana is the power to remember your contacts, emotional, mental, spiritual, and higher levels when you are in waking consciousness. So you have to be in a waking consciousness to remember all these contacts. Now, that not just this life, but previous lives, and also, this is very interesting, your future. When this antikarana bridge is built, you will be able to contact your future. I know this sounds very out there, but when you have the experience, it's out there for a while, and then you just grin and recognize what it is. This is what my future is going to be. That's why we want to build that bridge between the lower and the higher mind, and from the higher mind to the next level of consciousness. And this is called the antikarana bridge. To develop this kind of memory, we are really going to cultivate the higher mind and eventually make a breakthrough to the Buddhic level or the intuitional level of beingness, consciousness. In the past, disciples tried to work out their own salvation. In the future, disciples are going to work for the salvation of humanity. See, this is what go back to when I was saying discipleship. I sort of said this, where discipleship comes into being when you really get bored with yourself. You no longer want to serve yourself, but you want to give who you are to others. They're not interested. Disciples today are not interested in saving their souls. This is really a contrast from saving yourself to saving humanity. God saved my soul so that I enter into paradise and sit at the right hand of your throne. The quote. New Age disciples are not interested in this. New Age disciples work very hard to give of themselves to humanity, to release humanity's consciousness, to create human brotherhood and sisterhood, to make humanity sensitive to the guidance of higher forces. So this is totally different than personal salvation. The first was selfish. Me, me, me. Please erase my sin. A disciple of the future is not interested in their own life. See, they are interested in others. For such a disciple, that disciple is more important than the disciple themselves. If the disciple has this kind of consciousness, they are entering into the discipleship of the future. So what we're doing today, right now, is not only creating, we're being shown how to create an environment today, but an environment that's going to be our future. I hope I'm stating this clearly. Now, in the past, disciples had separate religions and dogmas and doctrines. I can remember going into a church that my son was eagerly participating in. This is going back a long time ago. And I just wanted to visit the church. I wanted to meet the pastor and I wanted to meet the parishioners and to listen to their message and what could I learn from them. And afterwards, one of the members of the church took me aside. Did you see that person who's a Mormon? They can't stay here because they're a Mormon. They have so far to come. So far to come. That's what sets a disciple apart from today's disciple, apart from the disciples of Christ 2,000 years ago. They were taught if they did not stay in their doctrine that they were going to go to hell, and everybody else that was not part of that doctrine was going to go to hell. In the future, disciples are all inclusive. For them, there's no just one exclusive religion. There is only one religion, which is the relationship between a human being and God. That's the one religion. They are not interested in doctrines and dogmas, but they are interested in the spirit. Listen to this. They're interested in the spirit of religion. Still, we know many millions of disciples are still interested only in their own religion. This is the only way to fly. So these are old disciples of the past. Disciples of the future have different visions. There's only one religion for them because they know that all religions actually came from where? one source. How can it be any different? They were differentiated before because of cultural climates, psychology, conditions and circumstances. They became different, but still the source is one. Disciples of the future are not interested in dogmas and doctrines because these are all separative. If you take 10 people who belong to 10 different religions, they really hate each other. I mean, I've been part of that. I can remember, I can't remember too much, we don't have time, but I was thinking how, this is when I lived in Florida, and I had been asked as a minister to officiate at a very large, beautiful wedding that was to be held outside. And it was this couple that I was to marry. They were very, very wealthy into themselves. Each of them brought wealth into the marriage, and their friends were very wealthy and very well-to-do. And so I was a little nervous because I was a woman. That's the first thing, and then I'm a pastor of a church that talks like I'm talking like today. And I remember a pastor that came up to me, another pastor had been invited to attend that wedding, and they said, "Who are you to marry this couple? Who are you? What church are you from? And you're a woman. What makes you think that you should be the officiant?" And I just said, "Wait until you go through the ceremony and then come back and talk to me." And that, of course, it made me more nervous than ever. But I had to get out of myself because the wedding was not about me, it was about this beautiful couple. So we had the ceremony, and after the ceremony was over, the pastor came over and gave me a hug, and he said, "Now I know." See, it's because he listened to the beauty and the power of beautiful words and that ceremony, which was rooted in love. And how can you hate when you are bathed in love? That religion is the connection between our heart and God. Well, I'm at number 5 out of 15. So needless to say, I'm not going to get too much further. But I think you're getting the idea of what the past discipleship was and what today's disciple has been given to grow toward. Okay, let me end with this one. In the past, disciples retreated to the mountains, caves, forests, and monasteries. Sometimes we have people who really like that. They say, "I wanted to go to the mountains and retreat. I want to see how I can clean myself, or create new plans, or cry for my sins. Or if I could be in a monastery, I would be a better person," and so forth. But in the future, the place of the disciple is going to be in this city, is in contact with all of humanity. They are in contact. I say, how can they, and let's just, I'm going to interrupt myself here, but if we take the idea, and we know that this idea is real, that we each have 1,000-petal lotus, which is our potential. And when humanity has a need, and the rays of hierarchy shine like the sun upon some of these petals, our potential, to give, because each petal represents potential, service, to give to humanity, why would we stick ourselves in a monastery? Why would we do that? See, that's where it was, where it used to be, is to meditate in the cave and draw long beards and have loin cloths and so forth, and eat wafers. Well, we can't live on a wafer if we are going to serve humanity today. So we must be strong enough and healthy enough and spiritual enough that we can live in the city in a healthy way and give our potential and our manifested potential to those in the city. Discipleship in the future is to stay wherever there is a job for you. It is to stay wherever there is a job for you. Or create a job for yourself so that you become a transforming agent in society. And I think that's enough. I'm going to stop there. And maybe we can do this again, and I'll do the other half some other time. Okay. So thank you for listening today.